Well, I am so excited to welcome you to BarkFest. Thank you so much for coming. I would love to know where you're joining us from, so please let me know in the chat. For those who don't know, I'm Zazie Todd. I'm the author of WAG, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy, Purr, The Science of Making Your Cat Happy, and my new book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful, or Reactive Dog, which is out on the 1st of October and is available for pre-order now, and was the impetus for organizing this festival where we get to listen to so many wonderful authors. And Dr. Marty Becker, who is America's veterinarian and founder of Fear Free, says Bark is a fun, enjoyable, and eminently practical read. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, but first I do have a little bit of housekeeping, just so that everybody knows how this will work. So this is being recorded. The recording will go out after about 72 hours. That's because that gives me time to check it. Everyone who is here live has the chance to win a copy of my book, Bark, and also I have a copy of The Education of Will to give away. So I will do the draw for that after the recording finishes, and I have to allow a bit of processing before I can do that. You will see that you have a chat box and a Q&A box, so please put any questions for Dr. McConnell in the Q&A box so that they're very easy for us to find at the end. We will make sure that we save plenty of time for your questions. And first of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Christy Benson. Christy is probably someone who is known to you as my co-host on our podcast, The Positive Posting Conversation, but she's also a Northern anthropologist, an amazing dog trainer, and a staff member at the Academy for Dog Trainers. Hi, Christy.
Hi, Zazie.
And we are absolutely delighted today to be joined by Dr. Patricia McConnell, Cab Emeritus, who is an author, speaker, and animal behaviourist who's consulted with pet owners for over 30 years about serious behavioural problems. She co-hosted Calling All Pets with Larry Myler on Wisconsin Public Radio for 14 years. She's educated and entertained audiences around the world about animal behaviour, both human and canine. She taught the biology and philosophy of human-animal relationships in the Department of Integrative Biology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for 25 years. Her self-published books on behavior and training have sold over 250,000 copies, well deserved, and her nationally published books, The Other End of the Leash and For the Love of a Dog, are considered classics and together have been translated into 15 languages. Her latest book, The Education of Will, is a memoir focusing on healing from trauma in both people and dogs, and it's generated heartfelt praise and helped other trauma victims around the world. Patricia and her husband live with their working border collies, Skip and Maggie, and a very spoiled flock of sheep. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's my honor to be here, and congratulations on your new book. It's so much work to get a book out there. Until you do it, it's impossible to know how much is entailed. But your books are fabulous, and I'm honored to be here. Really happy to be here.
Thank you. We're absolutely thrilled that you're here. And just so the audience knows, 500 people signed up for this event. This event is full. Basically, it's free, but it's sold out. And I'm not surprised because Patricia McConnell is just wonderful and her books are so much loved and they have helped so many people. So that's brilliant. Now, we're going to pause for a photo. So if you'd like to get your phones ready to take a photo, we're going to hold we're going to hold our books up. Do you still have The Education of Will there? Please will
Oh,
you
I do. I
Yes,
do.
thank you. And we'll just pause
Yeah.
for a moment so that people can get a photo. And please will you tell me in the chat that you've got it when you've got it. Awesome. Thank you very, very much. I know that everybody likes to get a picture from these events, so that's really nice. Thank you. So we're going to start with our questions, and just so the audience knows, there will be plenty of time for your questions at the end. So remember to put those in the Q&A box. So for many years, you helped clients with their dogs. What did you like about working with people whose dogs have serious behavior issues?
Oh, wow. People. I mean, really, my two favorite species are dogs and people. I love people. I don't love all people. There is some discernment. But I'm just fascinated by us, and I'm fascinated by us as an animal behaviorist and a zoologist and a learner, about primate behavior. So I just found people to be there are just so many people who love their dogs so, so much. And we're so desperate for help, for knowledge, support. And I loved working with people. I did get, after about 25, 6 years, I did get tired. I did get like, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Because most animal behaviorists see people with really serious behavioral problems. And there were so many tears and so many arguments between husbands and wives in my office that I got that, it was my job to help monitor and help through. It's very hard work. It's very hard work. So I did get tired of it after a while and wanted to go on to do other things, but I loved helping people, and I love working with people. They're just fascinating. Even if they drive you crazy, they're interesting. We're never boring.
That actually slides just perfectly well into our next question, which is about your approach to working with people, with your human clients. So from what I read, you have this really gracious and warm approach to human clients, which I think is
Mostly.
lovely. And I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think that necessarily has always been the case when it comes to like the dog training world. But I think, things are changing in the last decade or two.
Yeah.
So what led you to try and see your human clients as both interesting animals, which I think is part of, when I read your books, I think that I learn a little bit about people, like about our evolutionary history, which is fascinating to me. But also you have this it's almost like you approach people as kin, they're in need, they need my help. So what led you to that approach?
It was being at the university. I had gone back as an adult to study zoology after just doing this and that and this and that, sort of all over the map. And I always loved animals, and it never occurred to me until late in life that I could somehow make a living working with them, until I met some animal behaviorists at the Animal Behavior Society conference. And I was like, wait, I could study animal behavior. I could work on animal behavior, not have to be in Africa and leave my family. So I took all these courses on animal behavior and a lot of primate behavior. I actually worked with primates, fascinating, wonderful, little small South American primates. And so I started to see us as another primate species. And for a lark, I volunteered for dog training classes. And I started to see, I was watching all these chimpanzee videos, and I started to see all these comparisons and similarities between the way chimpanzees behaved and the way humans behaved in these classes. And that's just really what started out the other end of the leash, is like, wait, we have evolutionary history, we have evolutionary resources and baggage. Dogs have evolutionary history. Some of it obviously combines incredibly well because our relationship is just a biological miracle. But it doesn't always mesh in so well. So I remember being appalled at myself during a conference. I was giving a presentation. It was sort of early other end of the leash. And I was giving a presentation on how chimps and people are alike. So I had videos of chimps doing things and then people doing the same thing, sort of repeating themselves, sit, 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 chimps repeating themselves. And so I showed a video of bonobos having sex. And halfway through, I'm talking to like 400 people, I realized, like, if I'm making a comparison, I'm actually showing porn. And I should be arrested. Anyway, I was like, it was some older people might remember that. It was the Chicago APDT conference. Anyway, so that's a longer answer than you probably expected. But I think you get the
way
gist,
better than I
right?
expected. Yeah.
Yes. So maybe not that lecture, but certainly when I was younger and studying psychology, I wish I could have, I was in a different country, but I wish I could have been to some of your lectures and your teaching, because it must have been amazing.
Oh, we
And
would have
so
had such fun together, you and
I
me.
think so. And so the other end of the leash, you said that's how you came to come up with the idea, but it's published in 13 different languages. It's a classic of the dog training literature. So many people have found it useful. Thinking not just about chimps, but also about people and dogs, what made you decide to focus on the human side of the leash?
Yeah, it was because that was the side that wasn't being focused on at all at the time. I mean, that things really have changed a lot, but at the time, nobody really talked about our behavior. You were taught, I mean, that was, when I started doing this, it was when I first got into it, I mean, it was all about punishment. It was all about dominance. And I started watching, learning about primate behavior and thinking about us as this primate species and watching how people behaved. It was just so blindingly obvious that a huge part of what was going on had nothing to do, well, obviously it had something to do with the dog, but what was being missed was the human behavior and why the humans were behaving that way. Why do we repeat ourselves all the time? When you put a long vine-like thing in our hand, why do we not be able to not jerk it without training ourselves? So I just felt like that wasn't being addressed, and that was such an important part, because training, in my mind, shouldn't be, and now this is a very common perspective now, but it wasn't then. It's all about show collars and prong collars and dominance, and it just, to me, this is supposed to be a partnership, right? And so what is one partner doing? Oh, honey, who's the sweetie? Oh, sweetheart.
That's
Oh,
Archer.
sorry.
Right.
Easily distracted here.
He's like, I can't help it if I'm beautiful.
Anyway, you get the idea. I just, that was the piece that was missing. That was really, really important.
So considering you have this view of humans as primates, which we are, and view of dogs as dogs, and you're studying, this from a behavior component and a, evolutionary component. I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite way that human and dogs are the same? And what's your favorite way that we're different?
Oh, that's fun. Oh, and well, my quick answers come right away. So play. I mean, it's, if you study animal behavior in general, and by the way, anybody who's really seriously in the weeds with dog training, study animal behavior in general, because there's so much there, and it gave me so much perspective, and it made me such a better behaviorist, such a better trainer, such a better dog human, so it turns out that play in adults in mammals is really rare. It's very, very rare. And the fact that dogs are so playful as adults and humans are so playful as adults, there's no question it's part of our bond, and it's part of what makes this biological miracle of our relationship between them. So that's without question my favorite part. I mean, there's little that makes me happier, either playing with my dogs or watching my dogs play. And then I think, to me, the thing that stands out most as what makes us most different is scent, is the whole focus on smell. Primates are not famous for a great sense of smell, although, if you read my books and, a lot of other books out there, we are better at scent detection than we think. We are often unconsciously able. I mean, one of the great studies I quote in, I think, For the Love of a Dog, is how if you give mothers t-shirts from a newborn or blankets from a newborn, 10 different ones, and one is theirs, and you ask them, which is your baby? To a person, they say, I don't know, I can't tell, but they're usually right. When they're forced to guess, or encouraged to guess, right? So we're a little better than we tend to think, but we don't focus on it. We don't think about it. And I think that's actually been a problem with a lot of human dog relationships, because there's a lot of confusion there. I think there are all kinds of things that interest dogs, upset dogs. Just the fact that people want to go on a walk and dogs want to go on a sniff. I mean, just right there, how many behavioral problems of companion dogs are out there, right? They're not polite on a leash. They don't walk by my side. Well, why would they walk by your side? Dogs don't do that, right? So I think that's the biggest difference.
Mhm. Thank you. And you've alluded to some of the ways that there's been change in the dog training and behavior field already, because you've talked about how in the past there were a lot more prongs, and you've also talked about changes in thinking about the human side of the leash, and there's been a ton of other changes as well. So what do you think, over the years in which you've been working, what do you think is the biggest change for the better in dog training and behavior?
Oh, there are so many. And I mean, there's so many great people out there doing so many wonderful things and have been for so many years. I mean, just think about Karen Pryor's work, starting with dolphins and then Don't Shoot the Dog. You know, how many decades ago was that? I stand on her shoulders, so much great work out there. But I think I I guess, I mean, you could say the perspective of encouragement for positive reinforcement, but I think the bigger picture, I think the bigger umbrella is being empathetic to dogs. Is thinking of dogs as dogs, putting your head in a dog's, mind, perspective, framework as best you can. And of course, we can be problematically anthropomorphic and pretend like they're little children when they're not. But we have a lot of similarities. We're very similar mammals in many, many ways. Our emotional systems aren't all that different. So if you look at sort of the big picture, I think a lot of what's most heartening to me is that people are starting to think about dogs not as objects or possessions or things you have to dominate, but whether it's friends or family members, but mostly they're dogs. They're individual sentient creatures who are a different species than we are, who share some things. I mean, just the questions you guys are asking, we share some things and we're really different in some ways. And I think that big umbrella perspective is so important and has done so much good. We have a very long way to go, very, very long way to go. Right now, my area, which started in the 80s when I first got involved, super, super dominance oriented. And then did a big switch, Madison, Wisconsin, very liberal city in the Midwest. And now there's a big switch. You go online, lots and lots of electric collars, lots of send your dog to us for 2 weeks and the electric collar is $500 extra. So we got a lot of work to do, but I think it's very heartening how far we've come.
Yeah, absolutely. When you started to write the text that ultimately became The Education of Will, you weren't planning on it becoming a book. So why did you start to write it?
Oh, it was not a book. It was therapy. I mean, it was therapy. I was in a situation where I was forced to deal with a lot of the things that had happened in my past that had huge influence on my life and not particularly in a good way. And so I was seeing a great therapist, Anne Simon Wolf, here in Madison. And I just started journaling and writing things down. And then I also started reading. There's a book called After Silence by Nancy Venable Raines about trauma that had a huge influence on me. And I literally remember thinking, I close it, I cried, but I closed the covers and I thought, if I turn my journals into a book and it helped one person, and I literally thought this, if it helped one person as much as this book meant to me and helped me, then it's worth it. So yeah, that was what started it. Yeah.
And I think it's helped so many people, not only thinking about their own trauma, but also thinking about dogs because of the way that you weave
Mhm.
stories together. So at what point did you decide that this should be a memoir? So you said you realized if it would help one person, but was that a sudden realization, or did you have a gradual process of thinking about it and wondering if this was what you wanted to do, or how did that happen?
It was an abrupt thought of like, oh, wait, what if like Nancy Venable Raines, what if I turn my experiences into a memoir? So that was very abrupt, but then I thought about it for a long time and I will not, I will not pretend it was not easy writing part of it. Part of it was very difficult to write. There were times where facing it felt like it sort of set me back a little bit. And I think everybody needs to be aware of that if you're dealing with really deep-seated trauma. As one of my therapists said, there's a reason we repress things, right? But so I also, I love to write, I love to write too. And so it's sort of as I was writing in my journal and then I kept reading, and I started writing some about it. I love to write. And the other thing that really happened that hit hard was that the dog I had, Willie, who came as an 8-week-old puppy, as if he'd been traumatized. I have no idea what would have happened to him, whether, not a clue. But he behaved as though he'd been horrifically traumatized by other dogs. So I sort of figured out that he was behaving a lot like I was behaving in many ways, and we were not actually helping each other. And so then I got really like, okay, I need to figure this out. I need to help me. I need to help this dog. And maybe if I wrote about it, it would help both species, my two favorite species.
And yeah, I think that really leads us again into the next question, because it is about dog trauma. And I like Zazie, I found it really compelling, and heavy. It was a heavy book to read, but I liked how it sort of went back and forth between your life and your dog's life, and how you were helping dogs and how you were helping yourself. Like I found that, but it got heavier and heavier, and then it was like lighter at the end. So, so it's not just a memoir about you. There's a lot of information about dogs and about Will in particular, and about trauma in dogs. So what's the central canine theme of the book? What does the book tell us about dogs?
Yeah, I think it's in the title, actually, in a way, because the education of Will has several different meanings. So one, it's about helping my behaviorally messed up, super dog aggressive dog, Willie, about helping him, and how to, quote, educate, work with him, rehab him so that he was less nervous and frightful and not dangerous, although he never hurt anybody or anything, but he looked like he might. But I think the main point of the title, The Education of Will, is that what I learned in this process is that willpower alone cannot fix deep-seated trauma. And that was really hard for me, because I was like, I can deal with this. I could, I'm good. I'm good. Everybody imagines, being that there's a man behind them with a baseball bat about to smash their head into a, piece of mush, and I lived with that for years, and I literally thought everybody felt like that. But the fact is that dogs are so, mammals can be so easily traumatized. And for us to understand that what we see as aggression or misbehavior or being a jerk, that so much of that is an animal who doesn't have a lot of choices, who is acting out of this deep-seated trauma and that desperately needs our help. So that's a lot of what drove that, wanting people to understand that dogs too can be traumatized, horses can be traumatized, cats can be traumatized, etc. Birds probably can be very badly traumatized, even though their brains are really, really different. But that was really the driving force. All of my books have been, if you think about it, comparing humans and dogs. The other end of the leash is about sort of behaviorist primates. For the Love of a Dog is comparing emotions of people and dogs. What's the same, what's different? Education of Will is just narrowing down a little bit more, now it's comparing trauma and how to heal in both species. And obviously the way you heal that in people is often different in some ways. It's in some ways it's easier for us, and in some ways it's harder for us. But basically those things need to be acknowledged and understood.
Yeah, and I think we're so lucky that you decided to write about this and to write the education of Will. And it is, as Christy said, it is heavy in parts, and I think it helps people to know that, but it's also very uplifting and tremendously beautiful by the end, and so helpful to people, I think. And because this is a literary festival, we've got some questions about publishing and book writing that we want to
Oh,
ask you.
yeah.
So, the Education of Will is traditionally published. Some of your dog behavior books are self-published. So what are your thoughts on picking one particular route or the other for a specific book?
Yeah, it's an interesting issue for any author to think about. So traditional publishing, usually a publisher, one of the big five, or in New York City, the advantages there are, first of all, you usually get an advance. It might not be very big, but it might be a lot. They have so many distribution avenues. that nobody else has. They're the ones who can get your book in the front of Barnes and Noble. You know, so distribution is huge. And the other really big one is that you've got a bank of resources from hopefully a great editor who works with you, becomes your partner, makes your book better and better and better. And then there's an art department that designs a great cover. There might be a marketing PR department, although we're expected to do more and more and more of that by ourselves. So that's sort of the quick summary of traditional publishing. Self-publishing, the advantage of that is you have control, which you don't with big publishers. I actually had a really hard time with the Education of Will, the first cover that was designed for, I mean, not the Education of Will, although that was partly true too. The other end of the leash originally had a cover that I thought was so horrible that I literally told the editor, if this is the cover of my book, I won't be in the same room with it. And I had to fight to get the cover I got. So if you're self-publishing, you have control. You have to find the artist. You have to do it yourself. So that's great. Timing is better if you're self-publishing. Timing is way better. So New York publishers, traditional publishers now, 1.5 to 2 years from when you sign a contract. 1.5 to 2 years. That's long. Self-publishing, you can get it out a lot faster, but you don't have the distribution channels. You have to pay for everything yourself. I do want to mention, there's something that's getting more and more attention that's really interesting that I think a lot of listeners should pay attention to if they're a writer, author, it's called hybrid publishing. And I almost signed with a hybrid publisher, Little Creek Press, who's in Wisconsin, not far away from me. So it's self-publishing in that you pay them. They don't pay you, you pay them. However, it's traditional in that they don't just publish anything you send to them because you pay them money. They're very discerning. They only take a certain number of books. They don't have the same distribution as a big New York publisher, but they have a lot more than you do. So if somebody's interested, check out hybrid publishing, because it's getting more and more, there are a lot more options now than there used to be. And it's really fun and interesting.
So continuing in the book vein, we've heard you have exciting news about a new book, which I didn't even know about until I read these questions. So I'm very excited to hear that. Can you tell us about it?
I sure can. I don't know how much I can tell you. I can tell you that I did sign with a traditional publisher. I can tell you that the timeline is incredibly slow. I finished my novel last mid-January. It was done. Finally got to a publisher in June. I have a publisher, Kensington Press, which is a New York press. They're not one of the big five, Simon & Schuster, Random House. However, they're a very well-respected publisher of mysteries and thrillers. And for the second time only, I'm about to talk to my editor as soon as this is over. I can't wait. So all I can tell you is that hopefully the plan is that it will come out in February or March or February 2026, which feels so far away. But some people have actually asked me, are there dogs in it? And I just like, yeah. yeah.
Can you imagine the hate mail you get if there were no dogs in your book?
Where are the dogs?
And I'll answer the second question. No, there's no dog who dies. No dogs. I will tell you that people do, but no dogs die. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
If you're meeting with your editor after this, you can tell them that there are hundreds of people at this live event who are going to be on tenterhooks until 2026 waiting for this book. And we can't wait to read it.
I can't wait for it to be out. Oh, and I have started a second one, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I have a plot. I have a narrative. I have new characters. I mean, it's going to be a series with the same protagonist and the same dogs, by the way. But obviously a different plot and a different mystery. But yeah, so yeah, I'm on chapter 2 of the next book already. So
Awesome. I'm so thrilled to hear this news. What made you decide to take the switch to writing a novel?
yeah, as I said, I love writing. I'm a reader. Just a voracious reader. I'm hungry all the time. I'm one of those people who has way too many books that she doesn't have time to read. I love good writing, and it's partly my dad loved good, beautiful writing, and he was such a great dad in that sense. He would go to the library and go like, I think you're ready for this book, you know? Um, he loved beautiful writing. My sister, who's deceased, Wendy Barker, was one of the finest American poets around. And so I sort of have a family history of writing, but I love writing. And so I'm not quite, I think I also felt when I retired from seeing clients, I was like, well, I want to do something that's really fun, um, but still involves dogs and people. So I had a scene in my mind for years, probably 10 years. I've had a scene. It starts at a sheepdog trial. I will tell you that. The book starts at a sheepdog trial. Something happens. Something happens at a sheepdog trial. And I've had this scene in there for like 10 years. And anyway, I just find all those things sort of came together. And it's very hard. Fiction is so much harder than nonfiction. But because anything can happen, which is wonderful, except that means that you finish one sentence and then anything could happen. Anything, anything, right? So you have to make constant decisions about so many different things. But anyway, I just love it. I love doing it. And it kept me, I have to tell you, it kept me partially sane during the pandemic. During the worst of it, I couldn't write at all. But before and when things got a little better, it sort of kept me sane, sort of like my one. And then I got sick. I had a bunch of medical adventures that I still have many of. And that I can do, I can sit at a computer for 2 hours and write really well, without compromising anything. So yeah, so a bunch of factors came together at the same time.
So you've written a bunch of different types of books. You've written nonfiction about dogs, a literary memoir, and now fiction. Very exciting. So how has your writing process changed? We love, Zazie and I adore hearing about how people write, like from like, I sit at my desk too, like, here's what I'm thinking, like, tell us your process. We're curious.
I'll tell you I'll tell you what's changed first, and I'll tell you my process. So what's changed is that more and more and more, I'm focusing on the craft of writing. And that makes sense because when nonfiction, you want to write really, really well, and I hope I have, but there's certain factual information you want to impart. With fiction, you're just telling a story, right? And so the craft of writing and the way to do that, and I've taken very few writing classes. I've actually taken one writing class in my whole life, but I've read a ton of books, and I'm starting to go to writing seminars, and the craft of writing is more and more and more just fascinating me. What makes a story something you can't put down? What makes a character that you believe? Why did you use that word instead of this word? I just more and more and more, I'm just having a great time with that, and understanding how I can use that to reach a whole new group of people, people outside of the dog training world who still love dogs and who can learn a lot. Again, there is it's a murder mystery, right? So there's there's adventure and drama and some trauma in there. And so there's just a lot to be learned about both dogs and people, I would like to think, while being entertained. That's
I feel like hearing you say that, I feel like it's sort of twigged when because I reread The Other End of the Leash, and then I listened to The Education of Will in preparation for this conversation. And I feel like when I was listening to The Education of Will, there's a lot more picture painting in my mind from your words. You know, like a sound is described in a particular way that's very evocative. So I feel like I actually, you say that and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense from just from reading your stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. That, yeah, music to an author's ears. Music to my ears. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I would second that. It's absolutely beautifully written. And so this is actually a good moment to ask you to do a reading from the book for us. And Christy and I will go off camera, but we're still here. We
I
can't wait
will.
to hear
Okay.
you. Thank you.
And I thought, oh, I thought so much about what section to read. And you know what? I've decided I'm going to read the end. I'm going to read the end of the book. And it's I probably don't need to say, but I'll say so anyway, that I'm using sheep herding as a metaphor for fear. It is hard to send your dog to gather sheep you cannot see. It is one thing to send him down into a valley where you watch as he flows through the grass in a wide open circle to the other side of the flock. It's another thing entirely to send him over a hill's rise and watch him sink out of sight towards sheep that are not in view. When your little dog disappears, it feels so sudden. First, you follow his black and white body as it arcs through the green, becoming smaller and smaller as he runs. Then poof, abracadabra, there's nothing there but grass and sky. It takes determination to stay quiet in the emptiness that remains, to stare at the rolling hills and the spiky grass with nothing but the jazz riffs of a bluebird to accompany you in your sudden sense of isolation. But willpower is not enough to keep you waiting alone in the emptiness. It takes faith that your dog will do his work without you beside him. It takes forgiveness if you haven't yet brought him up to the task. And so you wait, forcing yourself to stay still, to let what happens happen, eyes straining for the sign that the sheep have been found and are gathered together, moving back towards you in a semblance of order. You stand and you wait, feet shifting, eyes focused on the point where you think they should appear. Finally, much later than you think it should be, you see the top of a woolly head and then a nose rising up from behind the curve of the hill. And then you see them all, the leader's ears flicking forward and back, chin up, eyes wide and alert. Behind them is your little dog, steady and true, focused on nothing but bringing you the flock, easing them towards you, carefully, lest they panic and dart for the woods. Closer and closer they come, and now they are closer still, right beside you, their eyes deep and round, so close that you can almost touch them. There you go. So that's the end of the education of Belle.
That's beautiful. I've got tears actually. That was amazing. Thank you so much. It's so lovely to hear you read from it, and that's absolutely beautiful. And in the unlikely event that there is anyone here who hasn't read it, you absolutely must go and read this book. And so we're going to go in a moment to questions from the audience. So just a reminder to the audience that if you put your questions in the Q&A, make sure they're not in the chat because we might not find them in the chat. And I have one last question for you, which is what gives you hope for the dog-human relationship?
Dogs. I have so many answers to that. And we covered some of them, this change in perspective and this new compassion and this science, us using really good science to understand our dogs and drop out of the sort of humans as dominant primates model. But honestly, it's just dogs they just never stop amazing me. They just never, ever, ever stop. I just posted on Facebook about a project that a friend of mine, Melissa McHugh-McGrath, I think she might be listening,
You see,
has been a part of teaching dogs to find the eggs of the spotted lanternfly, which is incredibly devastating invasive insect. I mean, they just never ever stop giving and giving and giving. So, dogs.
I love that answer. It's both simple but also very on point. So I'm going to start in with the audience questions now. The first one isn't a question, but it's just a comment that I think I'm going to read because it's so nice. Jackie says, Patricia, I just wanted to say I've got 6 of your dog books in my personal library, and I always give your adoption book to my friends who have adopted. Zazie, I've bought 5 copies of WAG and have given those to my friends along with Patricia's book. So thank you both.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I say hear about Zazie's books too. I just think they are really, really special.
Something bark-worthy happening in the yard. So Michelle says, thank you for this. We need help with a rescue that is hyper attached to me instead of his owner parent, my son. He loves my son, but is only comfortable with him when I'm around. I'm like his safety blanket, and we haven't been able to find any resources on building confidence to be able to remove the safety blanket. So do you have a question about resources?
Yeah, so it sounds like what she's saying is the dog is hyper, as she said, is super attached to her and not comfortable with her son when she's not there. Is that right?
He's only comfortable. It sounds like the dog is only comfortable when when Michelle is around with her
Right.
son. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to give advice in a situation like this without knowing a lot more. I can just tell you one thing I've done. I do not know if this is appropriate. So this is somebody to think about and talk to, find a really great professional animal behaviorist trainer who can help you with this. But here's one thing I've done with dogs like that, possibly, at least the sort of chapter titles anyway, is have the person who the dog is attached to leave for 3 or 4 days. So you go on a trip and you leave the dog with that one person. And by the way, that is not uncommon. I mean, there are a lot of people who work in shelters and rescue groups who know a lot more about this than I do, but that is not uncommon in a lot of rescue dogs at all, to have one person. It's like, okay, this is my safe space and that's it. But I've had a couple of clients who did do that, and basically they went away, and then the only person there was, the husband David or the son Josh or Martha, Martha mom. And then because it's the only game in town, the dog then becomes really comfortable with that person. But again, without knowing more, I wouldn't want to suggest that, but it's something to consider and think about.
Perfect. Thank you. So Beck says, and I think this is a great question that I think most of our authors have been asked. So Beck says, hi, Patricia. I'm curious if you have any suggestions for interacting with humans who are still set in the mindset of punishment-based dog training, or even just refuse to acknowledge the human part of the equation. I'm reading The Other End of the Leash right now and learning so much, but I've been struggling to communicate with my parents that empathy will get them better results with problem behaviors than yelling and getting annoyed. I feel like I need a Patricia McConnell style primer on how to interact with difficult people.
That is a great question. Somebody should write a book. Actually, there have been a couple of books that, can I name one? No. So that wasn't, somebody out there will think of one and quick put it in the Q&A. But I'll tell you what I've done with clients. I mean, I've often worked with couples, and I've often had one couple who was like all in, and then there was the other one, right, who was absolutely not. So I do not try to argue with them. I do not debate them. I basically show them. So one thing I would do very commonly with people with a whole range of problems, but that kind of issue too, is I would say, you know what, let's just see how your dog does to this exercise. So I would teach them stay, and I do it my way. And I will tell you that this is somewhat controversial. I would teach stay the way I've always done it, and I still do it because I think it works beautifully and it's kind to dogs, is I would teach stay by having a sit, stay, treat, 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 back up, treat, release, release, no treat on the release. But then eventually I would drop a piece of food behind me and the dog would get up to go get it, and I would just move forward, called a body block. I like it because you can do it really gently. It's salient to dogs. Dogs do it to each other all the time. Some people don't like it because they consider it punishment. But if you do it too much, right, you can scare a dog, right? But if you do it right, it doesn't. It just doesn't take that much unless it's a field-bred black lab, in which we might go to something else. But basically what I try and do is I set up a situation where you're using tons of positive reinforcement, thinking like a dog, and And then it works. I mean, you can get somebody's dog to hold a sit stay when they never would have before in a 1 hour office visit. And they're like, oh. So basically what I'm saying is do something using positive reinforcement that you don't think that person believe you could do. And there's endless examples of that, right? Just lots and lots and lots of examples. And that's what helps convince them. So getting into debates, no, and even coding the science, show them, just show them.
Yeah, I love that.
I have dogs who I mean, my border collies, I will say they're border collies, but I mean, I can stop them when they're running around at a dead run, and I can stop them and get them to flip around. And I've had people say, oh, you had to use an electric collar to do that. I was like, no, I didn't. I just taught them that as soon as they did that, I would say, okay, and they could keep running. Right. I just knew what they wanted. So I knew how to use positive reinforcement. So I think that's something that's important, is we need to help people understand how to use it correctly, because it's not just giving dogs cookies. It's understanding what dogs want and using that.
Absolutely. I love the show don't tell approach.
Yeah.
And I agree, working with family is very fraught.
Yeah, it's hard work. It's really important work. Really important work. I was talking to a sheepdog trainer who was telling me a story about how somebody had an aggressive dog, and he took the dog and he had it for 2 days and it was never aggressive. And you could just sort of see him puffing himself out, and he was just so impressed with himself. And I said, well, that's the easy part. What did you do when you took the dog back? How did you work with the people to teach them? That's the hard part, right? We all know that. I could tell when I was tired in a consult when I started just working the dog. Right?
Yeah.
We all do that. Every trainer in the world knows that. It's like, oh, it's so much harder to train the people.
For sure. So Pamela asks, are there any good general animal behavior books, and you did recommend that people dive into this, which I think is a great idea, that you would recommend for those wanting to do a deeper dive into the field?
Oh man, I wish my memory wasn't 75 years old, or my brain anyway. I can't, I've got some downstairs. I can't think of the names or titles. I'm so sorry. But if you Google, just Google. That's all I can tell you. I'm so sorry. I'm just not able to dredge those out of my memories. But there are several that are used in animal behavior classes in universities, and sort of find ones that have been used around the country to teach. Oh, she's going to look good for her.
I
There you
have, this is
go.
a textbook, yeah.
That's
Comparative animal
interesting.
behavior.
Okay, there you
Yeah.
go. Do I have any up here? No, they're all downstairs. Sorry. But good for you for asking the question. Since I suggested, I should have been prepared with a better answer, but so I apologize.
So Kat asks, I love the combination of partnership and also trusting the dog, but could you talk about what it takes to allow the dog to do his or her very best? The faith means also allowing the dog to make mistakes and realize they can come back from that. How can you nurture that in yourself or another trainer?
Oh, what a wonderful, beautiful question. I think the hardest part is nurturing it in ourselves for most of us. And I don't know if it's more common in dog trainers. I don't know. I have no idea. But, dog training in general is partly about, the nice way to say it is about influencing the behavior of another, right? And usually because you love that particular species. It's also about control. There's no way around it. And I think as a group, I find dog trainers can be so hard on themselves, really, really hard on themselves. And I too have to work on that. I think learning to give ourselves grace, learning about forgiveness. Here's a book that I can tell you the title of, because I read it often, off and on. It's called Good Morning, I Love You. It's about meditation and mindfulness, and forgiveness. And if you never meditate for one, don't let that stop you. If you never meditate for 1 minute in your life, this is still an incredibly valuable book to read, because it talks so much about forgiveness. And I think, once we start forgiving ourselves, I think it's easier to forgive our dog. Because I think a lot of the reason we don't forgive our dogs is because our dogs don't do what we want them to do. but that's because we don't know how to get them to do what we want them to do, right? So, finding that sense of grace, finding that sense of forgiveness, it's just, I don't think it's in our culture. I don't think we learn it. I don't think we're taught it, but you could get better and better at it. And I highly recommend everybody working on self-forgiveness and compassion and for themselves, because that makes it so much easier to be compassionate and forgiving for other people and also for dogs.
Yeah, I love that. I love that answer. I think there is something about dog trainers being very hard on themselves.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, maybe that's just a human thing. And I think also there's a preponderance of women in dog training, and I think women tend to be hard on themselves, and maybe men are too, but I feel like that it all kind of jumbles together in my mind.
I agree. I think it's a thing.
Yeah. Well, it's a thing.
Definitely a thing.
A consensus of 3 people.
Yes, yes.
So Sarah asks, what generic advice would you give for living with a teenage boy dog? Enjoy it.
Self-compassion and forgiveness.
Yeah.
And patience, it's just, yeah, no, I mean, I really mean it. Self-compassion and forgiveness for both you and a teenage boy dog. I mean, adolescent dogs can be just crazy making, as can adolescent human mammals, right? It happens, right? All of your training falls apart. I mean, I don't know how many people I've said, that perfect little puppy that was absolutely perfect at 12 weeks, that sat every time you asked, no matter what was happening, who is now 7 weeks old and looks at you like, I don't know, should I? So I think, one, just remembering this is not about you. You have not failed. This is what happens. You just go back to basics. You just pretend you have a puppy. You go back to basics. You don't expect too much. Be really careful about your expectations. I don't know about you two. I'm curious what you think. I think often our expectations of dogs are unrealistic. You agree?
Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
certainly
for
think they
sure.
can be. Yeah.
Is everybody out there nodding their head?
Yeah, especially if someone's had a dog before and they remember that that dog as an older dog, fully trained, was so perfect, and now they've got this new dog and they're comparing to that dog, and that can be really hard for people, I think.
It's very hard. And then you start questioning yourself. I thought I knew what I was doing, and I thought I knew how to do this. And yes, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, like every time I got a new dog, which hasn't happened, 4 years ago, I got Skip. And I was reading my books. I mean, I was reading everybody else's book. I was calling my colleagues, it's like, it's challenging. When you care so much about these animals as we do, when you think of them as family members and partners and friends as we do. So yeah, so patience and compassion and forgiveness, I think. And realistic expectations. Things are going to go to hell in a handbasket for a while. That's okay. Faith, that's it. Faith, that's the other thing. It'll come back.
So we have someone in the audience who asks, do you have any advice for the owners of reactive and aggressive dogs? Hugs from someone diving into compassionate dog behavior training for for my dog who is having a hard time recovering from a dog attack. And there's actually another question. I think I was scrolling down. Another person was talking about, I'm still suffering from the trauma of an attack to my lovely girl, Lucy, who is now, I think this is with a human trauma. Her side was torn up, gashed, and required very expensive surgery, drains, and changed her personality forever. So I guess just diving into that, yeah.
Yeah, no, let me address that, because I mean, that's what education of will is partly about. And I have several friends and colleagues who were deeply traumatized by horrific attacks on their dogs, by other dogs. It is truly traumatizing. I mean, how could it not be for many, many people? So, I mean, one of the things to keep in mind, that's sort of one of the first things to know, and I see we're going to run out of time really quickly, is that trauma often builds as time goes on. So you think you're okay the next day, you think you're okay on day 2, and all of a sudden 3 weeks you start falling apart. So if that sort of comes back at you, don't be surprised. That's the way it goes. Um, have tremendous faith, because many of these traumas you can indeed recover from. You won't feel like this all the time. It's really, really important to, oh, there's just so much. There's actually a book that is completely out of the purview of dog training, but I'm going to mention it's called Unlearn Your Pain. It's basically about neuroplasticity and how you can start changing your brain in order to react differently to things. I just was in a movie that absolutely terrified me, or started to. There's blood spurting everywhere, and I covered my eyes and I changed the image of a woman with a red skirt and dancing. I sort of changed it all, and it took me years to sort of learn how to do that. So read about trauma, read about recovering from it, be very patient with yourself, treat yourself as if you've had like major surgery. Understand your brain has changed a little bit, avoid triggering things, avoid scary things. Don't read murder mysteries right now. Seriously, read, watch a million comedies. Take really good care of yourself. And then don't, very gradually start thinking about changing your reaction to certain triggers, but know what your triggers are. It's really, really, really important. One of mine is blood. It's really, really important. So know what your triggers are, start learning how to deal with them. But
Apricot's in the house.
Hello, Apricot.
Oh,
He's like, I think it's getting heavy, human.
all right. Yes, watch comedies. Watch The Big Bang Theory. And I just want to say, I'm really sorry about what happened to you. It's, yeah, it's hard, but have faith. Have faith.
So do we have time for 1 or 2 more, Zazie, or do you?
Let's do one more quick question, and I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately.
We do have some great questions here, and I'm sad that I will be skipping some, but I think maybe one of the most interesting, and maybe a little bit spicy, but not really. Melissa asks, if you're up for a heavy hitter related to the education of will, what do you think is a clear indicator for those of us doing behavior work between building resilience and using a little distress to build resilience versus trauma response and shifting gears?
I think, good question. I think what you're getting at is the issue of what we know is that a certain amount of stress under the right circumstances is actually good. Because really when you're talking about recovering from trauma or not being traumatized, you're talking about resilience. That's a whole hour right there. But so, I don't have time to say very much about it, but understanding that resilience is built by a small amount of stress, sort of at the right time in the right way. It's really, really important. What is critically problematic is to raise an individual in such a way where they're sort of never pushed at all, where they never have any stress, because then they have no resilience. And when the inevitable happens, because it always does, then they can just fall apart. Understanding how to do that, takes some knowledge. But, for example, in puppy development, we know now that it's really important to stress puppies just a little bit, and then make sure that they have a safe space to go to, right? To recover from that. Because if you don't have any of those little stressors built in, then you don't end up with resilience. And resilience that's what you need, to get yourself back from being pushed out of your comfort zone.
Perfect. Thank you. And there are so many questions. We could obviously keep talking for hours, but sadly we don't have time for that. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful to hear your answers to the questions, to hear your reading from the book, and especially to hear you talking, especially about the education of will, which I absolutely love, but I love all of your books. So it's been a real pleasure and honor for us to talk to you. And thank you so very much, basically. And for the audience, I have a copy of The Education of Will to give away, and I have a copy of Bark to give away as well. And I will do that draw in a few moments when the video has processed. It takes a little bit of time, and then I will email the winner this afternoon. The link to the recording will go out in 3 days. And thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today for this absolutely wonderful chat. Thank you to Christy for helping me with it. Thank you to my publisher, Greystone Books, for some help behind the scenes. And most of all, thank you so much to you, Dr. McConnell. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you for everybody out there in the audience. It was delightful. Thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye now.